You know that sometimes in the Bible, God would ask the Israelites to erect an altar for Him, but not just only to worship Him with an offering, but also as a remembrance for them, so that they and their children could always look back at that altar and remember what happened there. And I believe that the death of Charlie Kirk 2 days ago is an altar in our time that we and our children will and should look back to and say, remember this. So who is this? Who is this Charlie fellow, and what should we remember? I'm glad you asked, and so let me tell you.
Radio Nieuwe Your Christian lifestyle radio station. Chat with Corné. We scratch where it itches.
Good day, all you beautiful people. My name is Corné, and welcome to Chat with Corné. I had a rough night last night, so I was up at 2. Just this whole thing of Charlie Kirk was in my mind the whole day, which is strange because I'm not a fanboy. I mean, I watched a good bit of his material because we think along similar lines. We might not agree on everything, but we overlap on most things. But maybe it's because it's close to home, or things that people say that's coming, especially from a Christian perspective. You always hope you can sidestep the bad things, and we can't always. And this is maybe a reminder of that. I don't know, but I was awake for a good few hours, so I got up at 2 and started thinking about, it's a bit late in news terms, so I'm never this is breaking news. I don't break anything. I just give my opinion on stuff. But in any case, so I doubt whether you will listen to my ramblings and not know who Charlie Kirk is, but just for in case, Charlie Kirk is an American conservative political activist. He's a outspoken Christian. He's an author. He was the co-founder of an organization called Turning Point USA. He was also obviously a husband and a father to a young family. And he was assassinated 2 days ago, doing what, in my mind, he does best. And one of the things that probably I've loved the most about him, and that is talking to the youth where they are. He had this program called Prove Me Wrong, where he would go onto the campuses and then make a statement from a conservative point of view and say, prove me wrong. And he would always be open for debate and discussion with all the people there. And man, I looked at some of those, and some of them became quite hairy, and he was spat on and booed and blah, blah, and a lot of things. And he just kept going back. I'll get to that now. But in any case, so hugely influential as a media personality and also as an activist in the political field. Now it depends on who you ask and who you listen to. If you go to the wikis of the world, he was a far-right extremist. If you ask most people, he was what I think people call themselves center-right. But in any case, very outspoken and bold in his beliefs and in his talks, and assassinated while talking to the youth on a campus. Now, I said that this is in my mind like an altar that we would be able to look back at because he was so influential. Some people reckon in his young age, he was only 31 when this happened, he was the main influence that got Trump into power again. Now, this is not because I'm a fanboy of Trump either. This is not a political talk. This is what happened to somebody who spoke up for what he believed in. So the first thing that I think that we and our children should remember from this event always is we cannot allow ourselves to live in a society where it is okay to assassinate, to kill people because you do not agree with their point of view. And that could be on anything. Now, this is not a United States problem. I mean, our own country is well known for political assassinations. Some of the big business boys that disappear and connected to all kinds of sordid things, but it is not a their problem, it's an all-over problem. It's a human problem. And the reason I think it's a human problem is because if the foundations are wrong, you can slap various things on top and it will go south. And maybe I'll talk a bit more about that later. But we cannot afford to live in a society like that. In this country, as an example, although we do not, or a lot of people like me do not agree with what the government says or the nonsense that comes out of Malema's mouth, for example, I can't put out a hit on the guy. It would not be the correct thing to do. Although I think we can do without his voice, I cannot take away his voice. So that's the first thing that we need to remember is there needs to be a safe space for people to talk in. So there should be conversations, there should be discussions, there should be debates, there should be think tanks. All those kinds of things are necessary, and it needs to be safe to open your mouth. Now, this is the one reason that I think the other day when I spoke to Bonsai Shong, we had this thing of usually if something say, this is the party for the people, or this is the government of the people, or the whatever, you should look twice because usually the people aren't on the good end of that bargain. And I feel a similar way about the groups that claim to be so inclusive and lovey-dovey and for people and for nature. Sometimes I think the end result is not for the people and is not lovey-dovey and is not so inclusive. And once again, I think the reason for that is that if they lose the foundation, and from my perspective, obviously I'm a Christian, so from my perspective, if you lose that base, things go wrong on top of that. It's the wrong foundation. But one of those, I'm mentioning this because if I look at, I spent a good amount of time last night on Wikipedia and similar places, reading up on what they say about Charlie Kirk. And I've been listening to his, especially his campus talks, but a few other things as well, for quite a few years now. And if I look at what they say online, and I look at what I see in the videos, I cannot almost get the two pictures together. It is strange. So one of the things that he is accused of is being hateful, divisive, all those kinds of things. Now that a topic could be divisive in a sense is, yes, obviously it will divide people according to their opinion, but divisive in the sense of you are trying to divide people is exactly what's not the case. And in a similar way, the thing of him and hate speech, I disagree with totally. If I look at the way he was treated mostly on campuses by more left people, the disrespect, name calling, spitting, foaming at the mouth, tantruming, and he kept going back to those places. In my mind, that is exactly a sign of his love for the youth, and I believe, being a father of a young family, that he stood up for his political views in a similar way. Well, this is all tied into his political views, but also his Christian beliefs. And he wanted to see his children in a country and in a future where things are going in a different direction than it is going now. And therefore, he spoke up boldly. And that to me is exactly the sign that he really loved the youth and was concerned about their future, because he kept going back into the lion's den the whole time. Any case, so that's the first point that we should remember when we think about him. The next thing is that we should remind ourselves that we need bold people in this world. We need people like him. Now, he was unique in a way, and he was obviously well-known and very influential. Not all of us will get there or needs to be there. Everybody needs to do what they need to do. But we need bold people, at the very least, to stand up for what they believe to be the truth, even if it is poorly received. And once again, being from a Christian perspective, the more we go forward, the more persecution is coming, the more, even in South Africa now, they are trying to legalize it so that you need to submit a sermon before you can preach it to the government of all people, to say whether you can say what you want to say. And standard Christian practices are seen as hate speech. Now, this is the picture in my mind. Once again, they've got like a touchy-feely, vague idea of what love is, and it is not that. It is great when there's some feeling in love, obviously. It would be a terrible thing to just do the lovey things with your wife and not feel love as well. But in principle, in my mind, love is, you can use another verb, serve. If you look at 1 Corinthians 13, which people love to do at weddings, there's not much about feely stuff in there. There's a lot about doing, sacrificing, serving in there. That is love. And so if we want to be bold in this world, and people say bad things about us because of that, this is the picture in my mind. If I see somebody sick and I give him a pain pill, people will say, wow, that's a nice guy. If I have something more than a pain pill in my pocket, if I have a cure in my pocket that I could give to you, but I did not, and people find that out, I would not be the good guy anymore. I would be a miserable person. I would be a bad person. I would be a lot of things, but not the nice guy, if I had the cure in my pocket but did not use it. So for me, from a Christian perspective, that is what I think about when I think about bringing the good news of the gospel to people, or speaking the truth in a lot of different realms from a Christian perspective. Obviously, it needs to be out of love. That goes without saying. If you say anything from a Christian perspective or slap the name Christian on it, and it's not out of love, there is a problem with that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about doing what you believe in, speaking the truth that you believe is good for society as a whole, whether it's in finance or in government, or it doesn't matter what it is that you're talking about. And you do that out of love. It is you bringing the real medicine to people. I I could shut up and say nice things and cluck around the topic, but that would be like giving them a pain pill, saying shame and oh, that's bad and whatever. That is giving a pain pill. If you have the cure, what you believe the cure is, and you bring that and people get mad about that, that is the way it is. That is why Charlie Kirk was assassinated. But we need bold people. We need to remind ourselves of that. The other thing that is like in my mind is like it's like disciplining a child. And if you see something wrong and don't do anything about it in love, then Proverbs says if you discipline a child, you love him. It says the opposite. It says if you don't discipline your child, you hate him. And a lot of people battle with this thing. They want to be a friend to their child, and obviously you can have a friendly relationship, but you're not firstly their buddy. You are the parent, the guide, the helper. You show them where the boundaries of life are. All those kind of things. You need to discipline them, and if you do that in love, you love him. Although in the moment the child might not like you, probably will not like you in the moment. And to me, this is similar. To say stuff that is the truth and that you believe in for the better of society from a Christian perspective is loving the people. For the sake of not getting into friction, to shut up for that reason, it is not love. So be bold, dear friends. That's kind of the point. That was the second point. If you think about Charlie Kirk's assassination, we should remind ourselves and our children we need bold people like he used to be. Then the third point, specifically from a Christian point of view, is if you are a Christian, you need to have this discussion with yourself and be prepared. And are you prepared for more persecution as we go forward? I mentioned it earlier, but Christian speech and values and all those things are seen as hate speech more and more. With the best of intentions and all the love in the world. And that is the way it is. It is going to be like that. And there's a lot of things that Jesus said about persecution. And that if they did not like the master, they weren't like the servants. If they persecuted him, they will persecute us. We obviously tried to avoid it, and we have been very blessed in this country to have freedom in our Christianity. And may it stay like that, may it get even better. But there is a good possibility that it might get worse. And when you think about Charlie Kirk, it is very real. It is very real that for your beliefs, and not just proclaiming the gospel, but all the stances from a Christian in the world, and I believe Christians should be involved in the world. And so when you speak in the world about worldly issues from a Christian perspective, you might get hammered more and more as we go forward. So are you ready for that? And I want to remind you of two things. The one is Revelations 12, verse 10 and 11, I think, where it says that it talks about our enemy, that came down to to be an enemy, and it says that we overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And I'm saying we now because that's what it should be. It says they, and they did not love their lives unto death, which means that there's a there's a place where we need to be comfortable in persecution and deal with the fact that what we believe in might get to the point where it's a life or death situation. And are we then the type of people that overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony? And if it comes to the worst, are we prepared to give up our lives? It talks about that. Also, in Daniel 3, the very well-known story of Daniel and his friends, and they were great servants to the king. They served him really well in their province. But when he erected the calf and demanded things that went against their beliefs, they said, no. And the people complained to the king and said, listen, these boykies aren't doing what you asked them to do. And they said to the king, listen, this is the deal. If it's between you or your commands and God, we're going with God. If you need to throw us in the oven, throw us in the oven. And God will save us out of the oven. And even if he doesn't, just know this, we won't bow to you. So that's a kind of the attitude I think that we should have. Be bold, be prepared for the worst. We always hope and pray that it doesn't come. We fight evil forces, but we are not in charge of the final outcome. So it's a sobering thought to have 1.3. Then point 4 is in a similar vein. If we think about Charlie Kirk, I'm sure the last thought in his mind that morning was not, let me greet my family finally. And thanked his wife for a good life and, greeted his children as if he's not going to see them again. That was not his last thought that morning. He was so young. Now, you could be young or you could be old. We don't know our day. So once again, are you prepared not just for persecution? Are you prepared just for the end? Just in a natural way. Are you prepared? Because we do not know when the day comes. So I want you to think about your conviction about what comes after death. And I really want you to not be lazy with this. I've spoken to a lot of people. When you get there, they kind of skirt the issue. And so they're not against religion. They're not against God necessarily. They're kind of floating. In my mind, it's a very dangerous place to be. So I want to urge you to really think about your opinion about what comes after this life. And I wish people would quote John 3:16 and verse 17 together, because everybody knows the verse 16 part of God who sent his only Son, so that everybody could be saved. And then verse 17 states it very clearly that Jesus did not come to condemn the world, but so that the world could be saved through him. And I always find that, well, not always, I find it often that people present the gospel, which means good news, in such a way that it is God, not good news. And people feel God's condemnation. Now, obviously, there's a line in the sand at some stage where God will say, okay, this is it. And, we all have to account for our lives and what we believed. And you either are born again or you are not. There is a line in the sand. But Jesus is coming into the world was not to condemn the world. And we should have a similar stance of going out into the world as Christians without condemning, but speaking the truth. And I believe that's what Charlie Kirk did. I know he gets a lot of flack for hate speech from a Christian perspective, which I totally disagree with. He spoke the truth, but he always did it respectfully, strongly, but respectfully, and with love, I believe, for the reasons that I mentioned. And so just please make sure that you know what's going on after this life, or make sure that you are comfortable in your conviction, because we might disagree on it, obviously. Maybe I could mention this, that it was not a nice experience, but it was my experience. A few years ago, 19 years ago now, I died in a hospital in Pretoria of a heart attack. And for whatever reason, God allowed me to come back to this life. And I mentioned this just to say this about death. Death is a very interesting thing, in that it is a non-event in a sense. Death is a description mostly for the people on this side, for the people that stay behind, of a person died, which means they are not with us anymore. But from the person dying, you do not die. There's no switch off and switch back on again. It is a seamless transition. You are exactly you here and there. There's not even, it is the strangest thing. So when the Bible says that we are eternal beings, and a lot of things that it says, I can tell you from first-hand experience that it is truly so. And I want to encourage you with this thing also of the process of death is in a way better, if I can use the word, than I thought it would be, in the sense I was afraid not because of what happens to me after death. I was sorted on that side. I worried about death, about the process of dying. Even a bad way. I mean, a heart attack is not like somebody shoots you in the head and you're dead. It's a process. And even though it was uncomfortable, the dying, and I think this is God's grace. And so I'm convinced that people, even that go through terrible stuff, because you do not die, you're just not in your body, and you're going on, and your body gets whatever with. So I believe that even people that get martyred and tortured and all those things, by the grace of God, do not experience that in the way that we see it with our eyes from this side and think, that is terrible. It is terrible. But from a dying perspective, because you do not die, you are in a way not in there. You witness the thing. I witnessed myself, and I could see the poor doctor trying to save my life. He was a young doctor. And I almost felt more sad for him, you know. But it is seamless, so it is not that bad if it comes to that, if I can put it like that. But it is coming for all of us, so please make sure. So, Charlie Kirk's altar, if I can summarize this whole thing, is because it was such a huge influence from a Christian perspective, also from a political perspective for a lot of people. And whether you agreed with him or disagreed with him, he is very well known for what he did. And if we look back at that, we should remind ourselves that we cannot live in a society that tolerate people getting killed for speaking up about what they believe. We really need to remind ourselves that we need bold people to speak up for what they believe. We need to remind ourselves that we should be ready for persecution. It is just a thing of settling yourself that this might happen. Are you ready for it? What do you believe about it? Speak to God about it. Face your fears. Do a lot of things, whatever you need to do, but you need to settle this thing in your heart. And then the fourth thing is, be very sure about your conviction about what comes after this. And so, just on a final note, I guess, these are just two pictures that I have of Charlie Kirk. This is him with his family, obviously. And And so I want to say thank you to Charlie for his life and his boldness. Because like I said, we probably did not agree on everything, but we agreed on a lot of things, which is uncomfortable in the world that we live in. And then in my mind, this is the next picture is the one that I always think of when I think about him, is speaking on campuses to the young people with respect and not telling them what to do, debating with them on his beliefs, challenging their beliefs. So that's my picture of him. And so there you are, folks. My ramblings on this thingy. It was a late night think scrum by myself. I hope you find some value in here. And yeah, I leave it to you to go do your own thinking now. And until we speak again, have a wonderful day.
Radio Nieuwe Your Christian lifestyle radio station.